Alright. We're going live. Maybe. Okay. What's up, everyone? So today we are live. I'm Ruby Moon, and we're live talking about grooming behaviors that have been normalized in society. Things that have gone unchecked, or things that have kind of been developed as to believed that it is normal. I think it goes a lot deeper than just simply saying, like, that is grooming and that is not. Because there's some behaviors that kind of enable, but aren't necessarily that. And I think that's where it gets tricky. Yes, we're also doing no webcam today, just because I want to just focus on talking more than anything else. I believe that there are things that have been kind of just accepted as to be normal. And a little bit of, like, yesterday, we were talking about age gaps and the whole idea of, like, age is just a number. Just a number. But it's not really just a number. There is differences. There's a huge difference between a 17-year-old and a 27-year-old. It might not seem like it, but there is. And I think especially when we're in an adolescent mindset and we're at adolescent ages and we're talking about things even beyond their concepts, that's where the age difference really comes in. So yeah, you could be a 17-year-old and a 21-year-old, and that might not seem like a big of a difference, but maturity-wise and growth-wise, it can be a huge difference. In the years between, like, 11 and 18, your body, your mindset is constantly changing, growing into the adult that you're going to become. And it doesn't stop until you're 25. That's when you officially stop evolving, shall we say, developing, shall we say. 18 is generally when you pretty much stay the same, but there are changes. There are still changes that are happening, like, for some people, the ability to drink, or for others, work, getting a job, having things that now get in the way of things you love, no longer having a summer break necessarily unless you're teaching. Things like that. Things that we had as kids, as children, are no longer things that we will have as an adult. And things as an adult we can now do that we cannot as children, even at 17. So I understand the sentiment of, why are you making such a big deal of 17 and an 18-year-old, right? At 17, it would be illegal for you to watch porn, or send porn, or any of that. But at 18, is now legal. And while no, a day does not really make a difference, like if it's like 17, I think if you're like, I mean, it does make a difference legally, but it doesn't make a difference if you're like thinking like this person's really gonna change in a day. Like, no, that's not the idea. It's more of the sentiment of, yeah, when you're a teen, you change a lot, even in the next year. And I think that's where the age difference is a big deal, because you're not in the mindset yet to understand the ramifications of your true actions. You might know right from wrong, but you don't necessarily know that having a kid in teen years is extremely hard and difficult, and can sometimes be difficult to recover from. Or that, you know, I mean, as a 17-year-old, you can still technically go to juvie and not be in jail. I mean, there are instances where you can go to jail and prison, but in general, you go to juvie, a lesser form of punishment than prison. It's not to say that juvie doesn't do anything, because it does, but it's also a very different environment than going to prison. And while at 16, you might have a job, part-time job, it's not the same as having a full salary or having the full responsibilities of work. There are things that are very different from a 17-year-old and an 18-year-old. I think I'm actually going to join the stage in case people want to, like, have the opportunity to speak. But, it is something that is it is something that is a big deal, and I think it's more of a big deal than what some people kind of make it out to be. In terms of the in terms of like how someone matures, like, it's very common for people to be like, oh, well, there's only like a 3-year difference between like a 20-year-old and a 17-year-old. And yeah, there is only a 3-year difference. And you could argue that, yeah, as it's like a 20 or 8-year-old, you could date a 25-year-old and it'd be no big deal. And that is true. But the difference is that as a 28-year-old and a 25-year-old, you finish developing. You now know the consequences of dating someone who might be older than you or even younger than you. And you're able to distinguish and give consent because you have developed beyond that. It's like if you ever take a health class, you understand, or sex ed class, you understand that the most important developmental years that you can go through is puberty. Like, that is where you truly do form the habits, the likes and dislikes, the how you feel about anything in the world. In fact, there is a statistic that those who like turn like 20, 21 are in that college environment, there's a good chance their political views will change. Like, you might be liberal and turn Republican, or you might be Republican and turn Democrat. because you now have the independent thought, the independent ability to understand the ramifications of what is put in place. And you're going to have that opinion and you're going to develop it. And that's just something that teenagers just don't think about. Or if they do, it's not to the extent of, I'm going to now change the world. Not usually, anyways. There are some cases, but they're very few. Most of them are focused on school and figuring out what the heck a parabola is or something. Or, figuring out calculus or statistics or whatever it is. Or where they're going to go to college. Or what they want to be when they grow up. Those are things that are still being decided. And yeah, it's true, as an adult, you might not even know those answers. But now you have the time to think about that. You're not going to school, or you might not be going to school, and you have the opportunity to work, to grow in your own life. And yeah, there are college dropouts and high school dropouts and people who don't even go to school anymore, or are homeschooled and maybe don't have that same restrictions. But at the end of the day, we all stop kind of developing at the same time. It's just science-based. Now, in terms of kind of transitioning into the topic of the day, which is grooming that has been normalized in society, it is a little bit complicated because it's not so black and white as this is grooming and this is not. But what I do think is that there are some behaviors that have kind of made it okay to do some things that, or have taught people that it's okay. Like, for example, the Disney movies, where yes, some of them are in fact 18 when they end up with their prince or whoever they're going to be with, but there are some that are not. And even then, there's still behaviors that are in those films that could potentially teach people that this is okay. A big one, as much as I love Beauty and the Beast, it is something that does touch on Stockholm Syndrome. And while you can justify the relationship between Beast and Belle, there is still that kind of area where it is not romantic, and the fact that she's literally held against her will. And yeah, she develops feelings and everything. I love the movie too, but it's even small behaviors that can encourage people to do these things in real life. Because, I mean, it seemed to imply that these kids, these people in these movies could do it, so why can't I? And there is correlation between people being inspired by movies and shows to do things that they might not normally do. Now, is that also combined with the lack of mental health and the things that other factors that might have encouraged them to do such things? Yeah. And I mean, I think it comes down to kind of all of it, is that I don't think that I don't think art has to be censored. I do think that it has to be kind of restricted in a way in terms of what themes are brought up when and for who, because it's important to ensure that the right content is put in the right place. That's what the guidelines are for. And when you have these guidelines that say like E for everyone or G rating for the general audience, and you have themes that might be a little bit more mature, like the iCarly and the similar ideas of it, then yeah, I mean, those are things that can be normalized. For example, in iCarly, there were kids who would replicate some of the behaviors that they saw in the episode and things that were submitted by fans. Um, and I definitely still need to get into that, but it's something that really changes how kids will end up being when they're an adult. For example, my own personal experience. Because there are moments as a kid that I look back to and realize that those are moments that really impacted the way that I feel today. Whether someone betrayed my trust, or someone manipulated or did something to me, or something, even small things that at the time I didn't even know were important. Things that seemed small at the time that I didn't really think of until much later. And these are things that really affect you. When we talk about trauma, it's not necessarily things that happen now. It's things that happened when we were kids, when we didn't know any better, that we didn't know was wrong. There is even further. There is the idea of the power dynamic. Where someone who is more powerful than you holds a deeper responsibility in the hierarchy. For example, like, it's generally frowned upon for a boss to date an employee. Because there is that difference, because you are responsible for keeping them employed. And they might not want to be around someone who is, or they might not do the same things that they would do if you weren't paying their paychecks. Also the same thing as a teacher and student. Even if you're a college professor, it's generally frowned upon to date while you're taking their class, because it creates this power dynamic. And usually these lines are very black and white. But there is one area that was a little bit, maybe, not so black and white. And that was the YouTuber and the fan relationship. Especially because the whole YouTube career was built around becoming close to your fans. You want to get to know them. You want to be that person. You want to be their best friend because you want them to watch your content every time. And when you develop that relationship, no camp today. I just wanted to focus on talking. And sometimes I get distracted when I see myself. The YouTube and fan relationship is kind of an interesting thing, especially if you were there in the early ages, because no one really knew the power of YouTube at the time and the effects that it would have later. It was normal to invite fans to your house and allow them to kind of visit you. I know there are plenty of YouTubers that literally publish their address so that people could go over and potentially visit them. Or it would come out just kind of naturally because people would figure it out. There weren't necessarily the concerns of today where you have like stalkers and everything. I mean, yeah, you still had that, but it was to a much smaller degree because you were only being viewed by like 100 people. No one thought that YouTube would develop into being this huge platform where literally anyone in the world can see you. Because also YouTube wasn't even available worldwide. It was only available in a few countries, not every country. Nowadays it's very different. Nowadays you can make content anywhere, from any place, and anyone from anywhere can see you. It was not always that way. It was actually it was limited for a bit to like the U.S., maybe Canada, maybe the U.K., and that was kind of it. And then slowly these servers were built to sustain other places, and they've got the legal ability to be seen in those countries and everything. So yeah, now we can be seen by the entire world, regardless of where they are, except for maybe North Korea and like parts of Russia that have like U.S. channels blocked, and China that have like just creators blocked. But in general, you can see anyone at any time. And I admit that there are things that YouTubers would do that in a celebrity status would feel weird. Like how we went to conventions just to hang out with fans. I mean, I didn't go to conventions, but you know what I mean. Or you would have moments where you would do meet and greets, where you would see them in person and greet them. And so there was this very mutual relationship between the creators and the fans. It was only later where that parasocial dynamic really grew, where YouTubers don't really know you, but you know everything about them. When you look at the way that YouTube was initially built, it was built for a mutual relationship. Not only could a creator get to know their fans, the fans could get to know them at the same time because it was such a small audience. There was only like 2 or 3 people, and eventually you would build up that relationship with your fans. And then there started becoming more and more people. Millions of people. And it was suddenly not so easy for creators to keep up with their fans. And there are some creators that didn't know how to behave around their fans, because the normal was to just hang out and be best friends with them. That was normal. But at some point, people started to realize that hanging out with fans, especially ones that are younger, I think actually what changed is when we had VidCon, right? When VidCon became a thing, now creators could now see their fans in person. And now they could understand that the people watching them were not their age. It was actually people much, much younger than some of them thought. In fact, some YouTubers don't even realize the audience they truly have. It's very difficult to actually calculate, because while you might be trying to make content for adults, you're actually also attracting kids. This is something that Colleen fell victim to, I think. Is that, at least she claims, that she made content for adults, but kids would watch her too. Instead of understanding that, and instead of recognizing that her audience was not the age of which she thought it was, and then adjusting her content around that, she doubled down. And it was like, let's stick with this. I mean, I'm still making things for adults, so it doesn't really matter. And there's not really regulations preventing her from doing things like that. And if it was just that, if it was just her making content and kids happen to watch it, I wouldn't blame her. Because that's what we do as kids. We find a way to watch anything we want, regardless of whether we're supposed to, including porn. But that's not where the problem really is. I mean, yes, that's part of the problem. Part of the problem is the fact that we didn't have those boundaries set, and that it was very easy for people to form a relationship with these creators, kids with these creators, and feel like this bond, like they knew them, when it was not really that case. And then live streaming came in, and that made it even worse because now you could talk to them live and not have to wait for the response back in the comments. When Twitch was a thing, that was a huge. I know it was huge because I recognized that Twitch was very different from YouTube, and that now I could talk with the people that I'm watching, not at the people that I'm watching. At the same time, they developed the culture of creators hanging out with their fans. And unfortunately, even then, there was this power dynamic between a creator and a fan. One that not everyone necessarily recognized because it's not always so clear when you have a power dynamic. Well, yes, there are many where it's very obvious, like teacher and student and mom and daughter or whatever. People don't recognize that sometimes you as friends, as peers, can have a power dynamic without even realizing it. If you're the leader of the pack, if you're the head of the sorority, if you're someone who is a position that is higher than your friend, yeah, you can have a power dynamic between them. And it doesn't mean that you can't, like, date them or anything. It's just that you have to acknowledge that you might have a slight advantage over the person that you are speaking to. And as a YouTuber, that can be hard to recognize because you don't know the people on the other side. You don't know that they are, like, fantasizing about you or idolizing you or worshiping you even. Sometimes you don't even intend for that to happen. And that's the thing, right? No one intended to be big. No one intended to have this much influence over kids, but you do. And there's a responsibility to understand that when you do, you have that responsibility regardless of whether you want it or not. Because once you have that audience and you understand that you have that audience, that's where everything kind of changes. Now, I'm not saying you have to change the content that you're making just to satisfy kids, but just be conscious of the audience that you have. And yeah, you can make the content that you want. Just understand that when you have those engagements with your fans, that you're speaking to a minor. Or likely speaking to a minor. You might not know that they're a minor. They might be of age, but just assume that they are a minor. And this is where it comes into play with Colleen. Because while she could have started Miranda Sings for adults, for adult jokes, that doesn't mean that everything ended up being seen by adults only. No, they were definitely seen by kids, and she should have realized that the second that she saw them in person, because everyone could see, especially with her ties to Nickelodeon and Dan Schneider, everyone could see that, yeah, she was for kids. Like, she was literally on a kids show. Victorious. And she's in kid movies, like Wreck-It Ralph. And she is doing things with children, making content with children, like JoJo Siwa. And employing children like Adam McIntyre. So even if she didn't think that she would ever have an influence over kids, she did. And that is the moment where she should have realized, okay, maybe having a personal relationship with these fans is not a good idea. But even if she didn't think that, okay, even if that was something that she just completely overlooked, that's okay. That can happen. But what should never have happened, is the idea of knowing that these are minors, knowing that these are kids talking to you, and bringing up adult topics. Like, well, you know, I don't think I really have to explain what you can and cannot talk to about kids with. But it's like, if you know you're talking to kids, you should make it kid appropriate. You should not be telling sex jokes to kids. Because also, how are they going to find it funny? They don't even know what you're talking about. Or if they do, it doesn't make it appropriate either. And sometimes you can encourage kids to, like, search things up that they weren't supposed to. You know how the internet works. When you tell someone that you can't search this up, they will. Now, the question has always been, how much reliability, how much responsibility does the creator truly have over their audience? Or is it more the parents who should determine what their kids watch? I would say the responsibility is equal. Yes, I would say that the parents have the majority responsibility to make sure their kids are watching something that is appropriate. But I would also say that the creators are important to acknowledging who is watching them and making sure that those who, because there is such thing as the targeted audience versus the intended audience. You might intend to target adults 18 to 25, but you might end up targeting kids that are 7 to 10. This is the way of business. People do this all the time. Like, there are shows that were made that were targeted for kids that adults end up watching and enjoying. Like My Little Pony, Friendship is Magic. And yeah, there was this phenomenon when it happened. When the creators of the show realized that, hey, wait a second, our demographic is a little bit different than what we thought. And you know what those businesses did? What the showrunners did? Did they try to make it more like, did they try to isolate like the adults from the show? No, they encouraged it. They created events that were targeted for those adults that were watching the show. They created cons and like places where you could meet and enjoy that were for adults for My Little Pony. So when businesses are responsible for changing their products to meet the people that they are end up attracting, then yeah, if you're a business, if you're a content creator, if you think that this is your job, then yes, you do have the responsibility to change your content based on who is watching you. Or restrict it. And I understand that restricting it does mean you get less money. But if you're truly a content creator who's making things for adults, you have the legal obligation to make sure that you're marking your content for that reason. Because there are things that kids should not be watching. Now, it doesn't mean that you can control after that if somebody ends up watching it anyways. No, you can't control that. But it's like, a movie theater might have like an R-rated movie. They're still going to check the ID. They're still going to do their best effort to make sure that people under 18 don't go to watch it, or 17, or whatever the actual rule is. And those who end up watching it anyways, they have no control of. But they still make that effort to restrict who is watching their movie. And yeah, it should be a parent's responsibility to determine what a kid watches and doesn't. You should be pre-watching everything that your kid wants to watch. But at the same time, I do think that the content creators have just as much of a responsibility, because you understand that, yeah, kids are going to watch you. if they're able to, they will. And it doesn't take too much rocket science to figure that out. And it's okay to still make the content that you want to make. I think that's okay. You just have to remember that you can't be interacting with these fans. Because not only are you a content creator looking down at your fans, but you're also an adult talking to children. And we all know that the way that adults are supposed to be talking to children is very different from how adults talk to adults. It doesn't matter who you're trying to target. You might end up with other customers. But you need to adjust your business to realize that. So with Colleen Ballinger, it's not that she should have changed the content that she was making. It's just that she should have changed the way that she interacted with her fans. Instead of like spreading a minor's legs on stage, clothes or not, she should have just not done that and recognized that that might be a little bit inappropriate to do to a minor. Or she just should have called on adult-only volunteers. And instead of employing a minor that probably was working illegally under child labor laws, you should just hire an adult to do the things that you want them to do like a normal person. You have the money to pay someone. It's not like you can't. You just don't want to because you know you can get it for free. That is a different issue. When it comes to anything, right? Anything that you wanted done, maybe instead of having an open chat where anyone can join, if you want to make those jokes, you make sure that everyone in that chat is 18 and older. You disclose that you have to be 18 in order to be part of the chat, just because you're going to be talking about mature topics. So yeah, there are measures you could absolutely take that would prevent the things that from happening. Because wouldn't you rather have the reassurance that even if something is happening, that you have the ability to say, yeah, I try my best to make sure that no one was like part of this, and I did try to keep a distance from the younger audience, and I only engaged with adults, or these people that I thought were adults. Because at least then you can be like, okay, well, she did check their ages and try to make sure that minors weren't part of the chats. But no, that wasn't the prerogative. That wasn't the goal. The goal was to create a fan base bigger than what you wanted, and growing it and doing that for free. And instead of having the ability to just say no as the adult, she didn't. But even then, there is like behavior beyond that has been kind of normalized and no one really sees a problem with. Like, for example, there is this concept in the adult world called aging up, where if you're an artist and you make certain content and you want to make that content on a character that is not 18, you organically age them up to be appropriate to make that content for. Now, some of that is done really well, and it's not a problem, because they clearly show that the character is indeed older, and it's not based on pre-conceptualized art of when they were younger. However, there are those that don't make that difference clear. And that is where the problem is. that yes, you could argue that there are environments, especially with fictional characters, that it is appropriate maybe to age them up, as long as that there is a significant difference, and it is a common thing. And I don't think that is the problem. I think what's the problem is those who don't really change anything about the concept and just simply say they are 18. Now, because the way that you depict that image is of the character, and that character is not 18. So if you're not making any changes, if you're not showing any difference, and you're seeing the same character as what they're known for, and not making a difference in how they age them up, then you can't really argue that you're aging them up. It's like there's a reason why Rugrats all grown up, they're very different from the characters they were when they were babies. Rugrats. Like, they want to make sure that people understand that this is a different show, different material, different ages. These people are different. And when you sit there and argue about, oh, she is technically 18, like I made her 18 by just changing the number, that is where you show that, yeah, you think that age is just a number, even though it is not. Age is not just a number. It's more to do with maturity and the growth of a human being. And then there are those who take real people and use them. And the thing is, some of them are not 18. And you can also argue the parts of where they are 18 and they're being used without the consent. But focusing on the child stars, the actors in which are definitely not 18, and people are aging them up to be 18 so that they are now age appropriate. That is where it's weird. That is where it's not okay. When it's a fictional character who doesn't have any emotions and cannot consent and would probably change anyways and has been like probably over with for like 100 years now and would be technically 18 turning now, that's different. It's different. But when you are using actors who are not 18 and not even using the images of where they are 18 because you don't like how they changed and looked and how they grew up, but when you're basing it off of the times of which they were under 18, yeah, you're wrong. You're wrong for that. And even if they are, there's that element of consent and not consent, because it is violating their privacy and right to their bodies. When you make content like that without their permission or without their guidance. So not everyone wants to be perceived in that nature, in that manner. And it can be very traumatizing to see that made without your permission and having it be this, like, what's supposed to be a fake image, but might look real. Who knows? I mean, that's why these deepfakes are so weird and creepy, because they look real. And they might not be weird, but I mean, they might not be real, but it's still weird because you know that's your face. You know that's your body. And the thing about it is that it doesn't really matter if they do or don't know. It's just weird in general. But also, grooming is not just like the sexual natures. It's just in general like exposing kids to adult themes at a young age. Like, for example, inserting adult jokes in a kid's show. Now, there are moments where you can get away with it and it's not so bad. I would say the big example of that would be SpongeBob. Well, yes, it had some adult jokes, but it didn't focus it as a main theme for the most part. Most of it was just dumb, stupid things that Patrick and SpongeBob would do. And yeah, there were some adult moments. It wasn't like a sexual nature most of the time. Um, but then you have iCarly and you have Victorious, who have very, very, very much sexual themes. Themes that should not have been exposed to kids. And child stars doing those activities. Like you have Ariana Grande, who is under 18, in a bikini, dancing sexy with a group of guys that looks to be college aged, being sprayed with water, and being hit on by these guys. Or you have off the show, you have Ariana squeezing a potato in a very weird way. And you project your fetishes on these child stars. Whether it's the feet or something else, it's still weird. But how do we ensure that this doesn't happen? Do we say, you have to censor everything? You can't do anything remotely close to this? I would say no. But I do think that we do need to have kind of stricter regulation over what we expose kids to. And I do know that there are some laws that are being placed in where you have to show your ID now to those sites. I don't think that's the solution, though. It is, because that's just a breach of privacy, and would probably, I mean, it is a way to prevent that, but I just think there's probably another way to do that. But you could also argue that kids have bypassed those protections before, so this is kind of the only way to do it. Even with like the required credit cards that sometimes require to prove that age, kids can just get a hold of that and just use that anyways. And so the question really is, where's the line between when a organization is responsible for change, responsible for regulating who is watching them, responsible for doing X, Y, and Z, and when they're not? When it comes down to the parents. And I think that's really the expectation of, or the justified, basically, there's the whole debate about how Family Guy has like inappropriate adult content. But Family Guy isn't meant for kids. It's really meant for adults. And it's even an adult program. It's not like it's on an adult network. So in that case, I would say that Family Guy is taking every precaution that they can to ensure that the parents are aware that they are watching a mature show and will have sexual content, and now it's on the parents to determine whether or not they want their kids watching such a show. And I also think you should acknowledge that sometimes you don't have control over who watches you. And I think the more important thing is how you respond to that. Do you try and develop a relationship with a fan base that you know is filled with minors? Or do you instead try to only talk to the adults? And I know that can be easier said than done, but at the same time, it's still a responsibility that you must acknowledge that you have as a content creator. Because whether you like it or not, you won't always get the audience that you're looking for. Sometimes you'll just get the audience that you end up having, and maybe that'll be kids. I think that when it comes to things, also, just in general, ensuring that there is a line, that there is a separation. And not only that, but that there are regulations in place to protect the kids from the adults that do harmful things. Like ensuring that someone on the registry cannot work within 5 miles, actually 10 miles, work anywhere near kids, let alone work with them. Everyone should have a background check no matter who they are, whether the CEO or not, I don't care. Everyone should have a background check. And even a mentality check, just to see like if something is like a big red flag, because maybe they don't have a record yet. Maybe they haven't done anything yet. But making sure that your employees are sane and able to do the work, especially around kids. Like, you don't have to do that if you're like in construction work, but if you know that they're going to be handling kids, won't you want to know that they are in the right set of mind to do so? And I understand that in some cases, especially with mental health, it can be a violation of their privacy, especially the HIPAA clause, where you don't have the right to know a person's medical history. But at the same time, there are ways to figure that out without having to cross that boundary. A simple wellness check can do it. Or something. Or you continuously do a background check to see if something comes up. There are some companies that do a background check every year to make sure that their employees are in fact obeying the laws and everything. And a background check is more than just searching up a name. It's also just seeing what that person is even doing. Are they doing any side hobbies that might be concerning? Are they selling drugs or something else? Like, there are things that you can do that would cause you to get fired because it's just not appropriate for kids to be around. I also think that there's a lot of toys that are kind of centered around perhaps sexual things or things that might be better for adults to handle. Like, there are like pregnancy dolls. And I kind of get the idea. You're teaching kids, and especially girls, about pregnancy. But at the same time, that might be something that is more mature than what they're supposed to be handling. I mean, it's also still up to the parents to determine whether or not they want their kids consuming such a thing and learning such a thing. But again, it does come back down to what you're putting available for these kids. What you're making available for these kids. It's like when Dan says, these jokes were made for kids. They found it funny. Kids find anything funny. Literally anything funny. It doesn't take much to make a kid laugh. All you need is like a purple dinosaur singing songs. But you have the responsibility to choose what those fans can have access to. And if your answer is, let's make adult jokes present in kid shows, then that just is a negligence of understanding the audience that you truly have. Yeah, maybe you are trying to target teens and not like little kids. But at the same time, they are still minors as teens. There's also, if you wanted to make more of an adult sitcom, there are networks that do that too. Ever heard of Friends or Seinfeld? Like, those are not on kid networks. So they can have those jokes. But you are not that platform. Nickelodeon is not that, or it's not supposed to be that. It's supposed to be for kids. And the thing is, what people don't understand is, yeah, you can have things that kids watch that adults enjoy that don't have sexual themes. Adults just appreciate good shows. You don't need to always insert everything that you think an adult will enjoy while a kid can ignore it. Because you can't also assume that a kid will ignore it. Sometimes people try to assume that, and it's just not something that happens. Oh, it'll just fly over the kid's head. Like, they won't even notice. And there are things that we don't notice, but there are things that they do. And you can't pick and choose what that's going to be. So if you're too concerned about whether or not someone's going to take this in a wrong way, maybe just don't include it. Maybe just don't. And when you do something wrong, when you do have those moments where, oh, maybe I shouldn't have done that, maybe stop doing it. Just stop. If you're like, I don't feel comfortable doing this anymore, it's kind of a little bit weird, then stop. Stop doing it. You do not have to continue doing it once you realize that it is wrong. Now, if you do continue to do it and you still acknowledge that it's wrong, that's your fault. And I also think that society in general just hasn't punished those who have done such things, because apparently they're still working in Hollywood and everything. So if they're still working in Hollywood, that means that they're still working with children. They're still working on kids' shows. And that's a problem. That can be a very big problem. It can be such a big problem that you end up with bad things happening. And it has happened. It has gone that way. And I think that there's a way to make sure that doesn't happen by simply making sure that they cannot have a job working with kids. Period. End of story. If they're on the list, it doesn't matter how long ago it was. If they're on the list, they should not be working with kids. And you could argue that sometimes people are put on the list that don't deserve it. But here's the thing. Yes, there are ways to get off the list. Through appeals and overturning such convictions. And I think that even if there is a mistake, and even if someone is convicted in a wrong way, it's still better to be safe than sorry. And I know it's horrible to be put in a position where you don't deserve to have these punishments, where you don't deserve this to happen to you. But at the same time, that is like a 1 in a million chance. It is such a rare instance where someone is wrongly convicted in such a way that it would be better to say, hey, let's put this person on the list. They are a little bit suspicious. And then go after them later. And then see, maybe we are wrong. And I understand it can be detrimental. It can really affect someone's life. But so can an adult who is allowed to be with kids after they have done such a thing. And I'm not saying that the legal system is perfect. No, it is far from it. But I am saying that erring on the side of caution and not clearing someone until they have been cleared of all charges and everything, and that something was overturned, it's just simple logic and pattern detection. If someone has already done something that is against the law, they're likely to do it again. And yeah, you could say that they served their time, they did their crime, but at the same time, it doesn't just end there. And I do think that there should be incarceration rights to an extent, especially for those who may have been wrongfully put in jail, or some who may have actually recovered from what they're doing. But there is one crime in which they should not have the chance to ever do it again. Actually, there's multiple, but one that can be easily enforced. And that is working with children. Because why take that chance that it will happen again? Why even take that chance? Why would you want that liability? If you know that someone has already done something before, why would you want to hire them? You could say, oh, well, they're so talented that I can't find another option. I'm sure you can find another option. There are plenty of those out there. There's plenty of ways to find the people that you are looking for. And maybe taking that sacrifice and ensuring the safety of your crew is better than trying to hire the person that you think is better and end up being wrong about it. It's difficult to ensure that it won't happen again if you're insisting on hiring the same people that did it in the first place. And we do have to be careful about who we're convicting and who we're sending to the list. But at the same time, we also need to be careful about how that list is treated. And it should be on public record that this person is on the list. That's the whole point of the list. It should not be something that is hidden from people who live in that area. And you can argue that it can be detrimental and it can ruin their lives. It can ruin their lives. But you know what else can ruin people's lives? The action itself. And you know what? I would rather have an adult's life ruined if it means saving a child's. Someone who hasn't even begun to live and grow. Yeah, there are consequences to your actions, but when we don't put those consequences in, we allow the cycle to continue. We allow people to get away with the things they can get away with, and it teaches others that they can get away with it. It teaches these people that they can, in fact, get away with it. Why do you think everyone was making racist jokes and tweets? Because we didn't do anything about it until later. Now we are. Now it's not okay. Now we have taught people that it is not okay, and now we have standards set to encourage people to not do racist tweets. We changed that. It was not always a thing. Now it is. So if we can do that for racist tweets, then we can do that for grooming, for behavior that should not be accepted under the law, and for things that need to be changed, period. And maybe if the concern is that we're going to put someone who doesn't deserve to be on the list, if that is the concern, that is the concern, like, oh, maybe someone will end up on the list and they don't deserve it, then we need to just improve the legislation that makes that possible. But also we have to question what they even did to warrant the question of whether they should be on the list. Now, I do understand there are flaws in the legal system. Of course there are. It's run by human beings. So yeah, someone can be wrongfully committed to something that they didn't do. It happens all the time. But that's why there's also the option to appeal and the option to retrial. For in the instance that there is a mistake, in the instance that there is something wrong, it can be undone. And I know it's devastating to lose your life because of a mistake. But it is also devastating to see a child's life ruined, unable to even make it to such an age because something happened to them that could have been stopped, that could have been avoided, that could have been checked, and no one did anything. The most heartbreaking part of this is that in many cases, the child doesn't even get to live to see the punishment given. It is much more devastating to know that than to see an adult who shouldn't be there put on the list. Because we can undo that. We can undo someone being put on the list when they weren't supposed to, but we cannot undo the taking of a child's life. And that is something that needs to be acknowledged. I'm empathetic to those who have been wrongfully tried and didn't do anything and were punished for it. But at least they were punished for it. There are those that did those things, that did all these things, and weren't punished for it because of some legal loophole, or maybe someone didn't come out with their story, which is in their right. But there are those who have done such heinous crimes that have not been punished at all. Or go on for years and years not being punished until way later when they're worth millions of dollars. Like Dan, like Harvey, like Bill, all of them. So yes, we need to take measures that will ensure that it doesn't happen again. We need to understand that it can happen to kids. It can happen to boys. It can happen to men. It is not a gender thing. It is an everyone problem. It is not an age thing. It's an everyone problem. There is no one that doesn't qualify to be part of this concern. From adults to kids, it is always a concern because it affects everyone. And we have normalized the idea that these are minor crimes. These are small crimes. So small that people are encouraged to do it because they don't see any penalty in doing so, and all they see is their urges being satisfied. It's a very difficult thing. It's a very sad thing. It's very scary because it means that they have not learned that what they're doing is wrong. So, in order to make a change, in order to ensure that it doesn't happen again, we have to be unified in how we change that. And if it means that someone can be mistakenly put on the list and to never work again in the industry that they're working for, if that's what it takes, I'd rather make that mistake and still prevent these things from happening than to end up that we were wrong. That person actually did do those crimes and that they were simply someone who just got away with it because there wasn't enough evidence to convict them. It's a very difficult thing, sure, to be persecuted for a crime that you did not commit. But it's even worse when the person who did do it, when the person who should have been punished, wasn't. And that's where we're going to end it. But to wrap it up, what I'll say is that just because it's normal and has happened so many times does not mean it's okay. Just because someone else did it does not mean it's okay. Just because we've tolerated it for far too long does not mean that it's okay. We do need to make changes. And we need to make changes that people won't like. But we need to make them for the safety of the children. And that is what matters. Because we're adults. We can control our actions. We can determine what is right and wrong. They cannot. Thank you guys for watching. I hope you enjoyed. Remember, down in the description, that there is that ability to join our community, to join the cause, so that we can make a change so it doesn't happen again. So we can end the cycle of abuse. So that we can end this all. No, it's not going to change everything. But we're going to try to change a lot. That is the mission. We may fail, but at least we goddamn tried. Power to survivors.